Urban farming and gardening have been growing in popularity worldwide, especially here in Baltimore, which has a robust urban agriculture community. The Baltimore Office of Sustainability has a new soil safety policy designed to help urban farmers and gardeners safely grow in city soils. The policy specifies how to prepare a soil safety plan as part of an application for a new use permit for community-managed open space gardens and farms in the city. Based on the findings of a study by the Johns Hopkins Center for a Livable Future, and in consultation with researchers at the center, Baltimore's soil safety policy was revised in 2021 to streamline the process. Specifically, it limits the testing requirements only to specific metals and conditions most likely to be of concern for Baltimore farms and gardens. In this video, we will explain the process for obtaining a use permit for urban agriculture and how to prepare a soil safety plan. Before we begin, you may be wondering about what a use permit is and whether you need one. Use permits are required if you are making a new garden or farm the primary permanent use of a piece of land, whether on public or private property. If the use of any structure or land is changed in Baltimore City without a use permit, fines may be assessed and a stop work order may be issued by the City of Baltimore, which can then trigger further fines if violated. Getting a stop work order is rare for gardens and farms, but not unheard of. Use permits do not expire, so once you've got yours, you won't need to worry about it again unless you're changing the primary use of the property. If you are applying for a use permit, you will need to submit a soil safety plan to the Office of Sustainability for approval. It is free to submit a plan for review. What to include in your soil safety plan depends on what types of soil you are planning to grow in. We will go through the different processes in this film.
Bringing soil to your site from a trusted source is generally recommended as a way to limit your contact with soil contamination. If doing this, it's important to make sure that you use a barrier, like landscape fabric, to separate the soil you bring in from the soil already on the site. While no soil is free of contamination, soil imported from off-site has generally been found to create safer growing conditions in Baltimore City compared to existing soils. If you plan to grow food entirely in soil or compost brought in from off-site and plan to separate that soil or compost from the existing soils on site, you only need to list the source of the soil or compost from off-site and how you plan to separate the off-site soil from the existing soil. You may still wish to test soils brought in from off-site, but doing so is not required for your soil safety plan. Acceptable sources of new soil include professional landscaping companies and land that has been used for farming for multiple years and that is regularly tested for soil contamination. Acceptable methods of separating the soil brought from off-site from the existing soil include removing and fully replacing the top 12 inches of existing soil, growing in structures or containers with bottoms made of hard plastic, clay, or wood, growing on top of concrete, putting a barrier over existing soil, such as tear-resistant woven landscape fabric, before adding soil from off-site. Because commercial farm workers spend far more hours in close contact with soils than most home gardeners or community garden members, they are likely to have greater contact with soil contamination, if it is present. Commercial urban farms should give stronger consideration to using imported soil.
Growing food in existing soil at your site can be a higher risk option, but that risk can be minimized by doing a thorough investigation and taking some simple steps to assess your growing area before beginning to grow. If you intend to grow food in existing soil on your site, or if you plan to grow in soil or compost from off-site that has not been separated from existing soil with a barrier, you'll need to describe the steps you have taken to understand the potential sources of soil contamination on your site. First, you'll need to investigate your site's history. To do so, it's important to document all past land uses that you find. A good place to start is by looking at the Baltimore City Sanborn maps, which were created for insurance companies in the late 1800s and early 1900s. These are particularly useful to check if there were former buildings on a site and what they may have been used for. The easiest way to access these maps is to visit the central branch of the Enoch Pratt Free Library. Staff there can help you find your site and interpret the maps. Production of the Sanborn map stopped in 1982. To learn more about recent land uses, you can consult historical aerials or other web searches to learn clues about more recent past uses. You can also talk to your neighbors, your local community association, or the Baltimore City Historical Society to find out what they know about past uses on or around your site. If through this research you find that your site was formerly an automobile maintenance or repair shop, a car wash, dry cleaner, hazardous material storage or transfer, industrial or chemical manufacturing site, industrial lagoon or pit, landfill or junkyard, machine or metalwork shop, wood preserving shop, or railroad tracks or yards, you may decide that it would be better to grow in soil from off-site separated from existing soil by a barrier. Or you may decide to grow at a different site. Otherwise, if you intend to grow in or on existing soil, you would need to conduct Professional Environmental Site Assessment, or ESA, and submit documentation of any cleanup activities recommended in the ESA in order to receive approval for a use permit. ESAs can be thousands of dollars, and is another reason why it may be easiest to grow in soil from off-site or to choose a different site. In addition to understanding your site's past, it is important to perform a thorough visual inspection of its current condition to identify any potential hotspots that may suggest potential contamination. These could be places where contamination is more likely and where you need to test the soil separately if you intend to grow food there. Take notes on how the land is being used on the properties near your site, especially those uphill from your site. A nearby gas station or laundromat, for instance, would be worth noting. Observe whether there are any areas where rainwater runoff tends to flow and collect during storms, such as ruts or bare spots. If contamination is suspected, it is likely to be higher in these areas. Also take notes on whether trash or other debris has been present at your site, and especially what and where those items were left. Certain items, such as oil cans or old batteries, could contaminate the soil in that spot.
Once you understand as much as you can about your site, the next step is testing the soil. All sites in Baltimore City where you intend to grow food in or on existing soils without a barrier should be tested for lead and arsenic at a minimum, with separate testing for any potential hotspots. You will need to send soil samples to a soil testing lab, as home soil testing kits are unreliable. Several university labs provide reliable heavy metals testing for a small fee. You can learn more about where and how to conduct a soil test in our soil testing guide. Based on our research, lead is the most common contaminant of concern among urban growers. If your lead levels are under 400 parts per million, these are suitable for food production and your soil safety plan will be approved. Best management practices, which are described in the policy and summarized in our best practices video, are still encouraged if you plan to have children on site. If your lead levels are 400 to 999 parts per million, you will be required to provide a plan explaining how you intend to implement the best management practices to minimize soil contact. In particular, root vegetables and tubers, such as potatoes or carrots, should not be grown because they tend to take up lead at higher rates. Children under 6 years old should not be allowed to interact with the soil, and if children are on site, they should be closely monitored to ensure they are not getting soil in their mouths. Pregnant people should also be advised to limit their soil contact. If your plan is approved, it will include these conditions.
If your lead levels are over 1,000 parts per million, your soil safety plan will not be approved to grow food in or on this existing soil. You may wish to consider choosing a different site for food production. If you still want to grow food at this site, you can bring in new soil from off-site and separate it from existing soils with a barrier. You can then resubmit your testing results and soil safety plan. For arsenic, it's recommended to have levels below 6.4 parts per million, which is the average level found in soils across the U.S. If your arsenic levels are above 6.4 parts per million, you'll be asked to describe how you plan to follow best management practices to minimize soil contact, and your plan may not be approved depending on the level found.
If you plan to grow food using a method that does not require soil, such as through hydroponics or aquaponics where plants are grown in water, just describe your growing method in your soil safety plan. There may be other metals or contaminants in your soils, including some that soil testing labs typically do not test for. This is why investigating site history is an important complement to soil testing. There are also many other simple and effective ways to reduce your exposure to metals in urban agriculture. Check out our best practices video for additional tips. Now that you've learned about what you need to do to submit a soil safety plan, visit baltimoresustainability.org to download the format for the plan so you can get the process started toward applying for and receiving a use permit. Happy and safe growing!